from the private sector being coordinated by Dr. Simangaliso Hlengwa. Siyanamkela. Our
Inkosi Chair.
Thank you. Then I think, can we have Honorable Dube akasiphe njena umthandazo omncane. Ngena Dube.
Okay, Hlalo, thank you very much. Sithandaze babana ngalesikhathi samanje siyalibonga ithuba usinikeze lona lokuba sisebenzele isizwe nabantu bakho. Sibonga ukuvikeleka ke uNkulunkulu oyingcwele kuzo zonke inhlangothi zabantu bakho obabekile ukuba basisize nangalesikhathi esibhekene naso esinzima se-COVID-19. Ukusibusiso kukho konke egameni lenkosi yethu. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Honorable Dube. We need these prayers throughout. Then that will take us to number 2. Attendance and apologies, Xolan.
Thank you, Chairperson. We have one apology from but she's driving.
Honorable Mavuso, who is driving? The one that
Yes.
said, okay, thank you. Thank you then. Then that is concluding our third bulletin, the constitution of the meeting. As you have said that we're only having one apology, that means our meeting is correcting. Can we then go for the bullet point number 4 with the adoption of the agenda? Can I see with the show of hands for the adoption of the agenda? In the absence of the hands from my side, you can just say, Chair, I will then call you.
Chair, I propose.
Chair, second.
Seconded, Chair.
Thank you. But all of you came, I propose, and the second one, I second. For the purpose of recording, can we get your names and surnames so that we attach? We don't have ghosts.
Honorable Mavuso seconded, Chair.
Uvos Dube propose the adoption of the agenda.
Correct.
And Honorable Mavuso is seconding. the
Thank you so
adoption
much.
of the agenda.
Thank you so much. I am happy to see that Bridget is with us. Mntanami kuzode kube right. Siyabulela ukusoka kunye nathi emeeting yethu. Siyakwamkela ke sisithi njengokuphila kube kunye nathi full time. Siyabonga. Thank you, members. Now we are on bullet point number 5. I'm not going to be long. I just want to say we are only having this meeting today as a follow-up meeting. I think we had our meeting, was it in April or in March? But it is in April, yes. This is a follow-up meeting as an update from the private sector hospitals. We will always keep on doing like this because when we are having these institutions, as much as they are called private, they are private. They are private according to the way of identifying them. But the fact remains, they are all concerned about our communities. They are, I would say, their beneficiaries are the same ones as we are doing. In our first meeting, the reason why I decided that we must have that meeting, it was because of the highlights that were coming out in the line of the first case that came out as far as the COVID-19 is concerned. Because I knew that in my conscience, they are our babies. We cannot just let them in the cold. We have to bring them closer to us so that they've got us next to them, as we know that they belong to us. We are the ones who gave them the licenses to practice. There's no way that we can let them do anyhow. We are now, from that day, we were bringing them home so that they know that we are there. We will always look for the accountability. At the same time, we are there for them to come up with their problems that they encounter in their process of doing their service delivery. At the same time, I would say the presentation they did to us, to me, it has given me a green light that according to the resolutions that were taken as far as the National Health Insurance is concerned, I could see that they are with us. They are willing to do that. They are prepared to work with us. That is what I got in their presentation when they were here. We do understand that if you are a healthcare worker and you have got some regulations that are regulating you, I would put to the issue of the first case that was identified. When COVID-19 came, it was so difficult to see that to see it. Even now, no one can say when I'm entering the gate, I am COVID-19 positive. So the situation that is being faced by our healthcare workers, it's a difficult one. With the NHI, I am happy to have them on board. I would be happy, and I will always be happy if that can be confirmed. I am saying that there is nothing bad like having people that are throwing the stones instead of making sure that we are all here for the survival of each and every patient that has entered a healthcare center. I am saying that through the NHI, there will be a purchase of service that will be open to everybody, that will be talking to all of us. Nothing will be hidden. The accountability, whether you are private or you are public, the fact remains the line of accountability. There will be one line of accountability, and our people will be having their choice to go wherever they feel they would like to go as far as the NHI is concerned. Having said that, we have gone through all the issues as far as the COVID-19 is concerned, all the pains and everything. Whoever is in the healthcare faculty, I am sure everybody has got so many experiences that are not that good, because every time when you are with the patient, especially the doctors, you would like to see the patient surviving. So having done that, you wouldn't be having somebody who is going to be the care of the carer. That is the gap that I know it is there. But I'm sure as we walk this road, definitely at the end of the day, we will be identifying the gaps that need to be filled. The issue of the care of the carer is very, very much critical. Get broken, emotional, physical, and spiritual in all ways. As we have seen that during the COVID-19, we had so high number of the gender-based violence at a critical time. So all those things, they have not been taken care of because no one thought of COVID-19 as it came. But I'm sure namhlanje sonke we are aware ukuthi how dangerous the situation of COVID-19 has put us, especially as this committee. When you are going to get a report that is something wrong is taking place in a certain hospital and you cannot go inside because of the regulations. But I wouldn't like to say more, but I am very, very much grateful to have this time, this second session of our meeting with the private sector hospitals, so that we get the update from their side. How did they fare so far? Thank you so much. Then I'm not sure whether members would like to say something before we can get the presentation. Members?
It's fine, Honorable Chair. We can go on with the presentation.
That is Honorable Rajbansi. Anyone with the same feeling?
Yes, Chair, we can. Yes, Chair, Honorable Verona, we can continue with the presentation.
Thank you so much, members. Then it's taking us to 6.1. Update report on COVID-19 and interventions. And then we'll be having our questions and comments at the end after they have done their presentation. I don't know how they have arranged themselves. We'll only hear from them. Dr. Tengwa, do we have any way of arranging them as to how they do their presentation?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, honorable members. This time I had thought it would be better to allow the individual hospitals to decide how best they want to present. But I must note, Chair, that the proposal for this meeting came in earlier, but then it was sort of could not go through. So on their behalf, I want to apologize, because then the second formal invitation, what I sent them and I assisted to send to them late. So, but I know that they've been doing quite a good job, so it's going to be easy for them to present, such that the committee gets an idea of what has transpired from April till now. Now, I don't know how would my colleagues want to do it. I'm sorry, Chair. I was thinking that there's someone who has sinusitis, so I was thinking of praying for that honorable member or person. Dr. Mhlongo or Dr. Bula or whoever is representing Life, who wants to go first?
Dr. Schlingler, thank you for asking us this opportunity. Can you all hear me?
Sorry?
Can you all hear me, Dr. Schlingler? Dr. Bula speaking.
Yes, I can hear Dr. Bula. Your voice is faint. I don't know about other members.
Okay, I'll just push up my volume. Let's see.
Yeah. You can also ask the young staff to help you.
To present that. Yeah, the young stars were not sure whether they were invited, so they stayed out of it. And firstly, I must thank you all for asking us to do our presentation. My presentation is going to be very brief, and I will also tell you some of the challenges that the private sector is facing. I think that will give the context of the problems that we are having with COVID. Is that okay, Chair?
That's perfect. That's perfect.
All right. As you know, we run 4 or 5 hospitals in the KZN area, with a hospital in Richards Bay, one called Ribumed, and Sipingo Hospital, Durdok City Hospital, and Escott Park. Now, we, in the early stages of this, went to the Department of Health and offered our services by offering free beds to the department at Escott Park. A number of negotiations took place there, and the Department of Health accepted our proposal to use our beds, and many meetings were held regarding this. I'm trying to show my slides. I'm just trying to get many meetings were held regarding this, but eventually I think the department found that they had enough capacity and did not really need to use our beds. So to date, we have an offer of offering them 50 beds at Escott Park, but they have not had the need to use it. It really means that the Department of Health in the private sector seem to have control of the disease quite well. Because if they needed our beds, they would have used our beds, but it was not necessary. So I think that's the first point I want to make, that I think the Department of Health has done exceptionally well in looking after COVID patients in our area. I must say at this stage that if we look at the number of patients that we've had, I'm going to give you some statistics just to put in context exactly. Are you seeing any? Can you see?
Sorry, Chair.
Yes.
Okay.
Chair. Sorry, Chair. Dr. Pula is presenting. We don't see slide. I don't know whether it's my problem. I don't see a slide. Neither I don't see him. At least, yeah. If it could appear, or we see the slides.
Okay.
It makes life better.
Dr. Pula, do we have a presentation?
Yes, I have a presentation. Just see if you can see the slide now.
Can we let our secretariat assist you in beaming it?
Okay, I've on my side it's saying PowerPoint. It's opening. I'll just tell you now. Oh. Are you seeing it or not yet?
There's nothing yet.
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay,
if others can send their presentation to Xolani so that when their turn comes, it will be easy to assist.
Can you see this now?
There's nothing.
Nothing. Okay. I've got something on my side.
Honorable Chair, may I suggest something? Unfortunately, I can't see my hand.
No, I can see you.
Oh, you can see me. Can you perhaps help? Our focus was mostly on treating gastro and pneumonias, so they robbed us on this. Please help us, Xolani. If you can tell Dr. Pula what to do.
Xolani, I've got my slides showing now. For some reason, can you all see them not?
Oh, Dr. Pula, maybe if you can show open your
camera.
Your camera, yeah. Because I think it's the first. It's the first
icon.
Yeah, that looks like a camera.
If possible, it will be easy for him to just forward it to me.
Okay, let me forward it to you, then that will be the best. Meanwhile, I'll just I'll forward this to you. This is what I wanted to forward.
How long will it take for Dr. Pula to forward this to Xolani so that as they are busy doing it, we can be in a position of
giving I think
the next presenter?
The next presentation to go for it, yeah.
Okay, so I would say, Dr. Mtongo, you can then come in. pending Dr. Bula to have himself sorted out.
Okay. That is the one on the phone.
Seconded.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just trying, because I noted the challenge of presenting, I want to make sure that in the meantime, I'm forwarding the email to Golan. If you can just give me a second, I will be quick about it.
Who else will be doing the presentation so that all put. Okay.
It seems as if Dr. Mhlongo is okay.
Yes. Yes.
Hello.
Sandile, I've put ours up if that's what you'd like to have a look at.
Yes, Craig, thank you very much. I just want to finalize and send to Golan, but we can start. And maybe, Craig, let me let you open, and then I will kick off as we discuss it.
Thank you, Sandile. Honourable Chair and members of the Portfolio Committee on Health, from Netcare's perspective, thank you for affording us the opportunity to present a brief update to the committee on our journey through this pandemic, which started with us in KwaZulu-Natal in March. Before I hand over to Sandile to take us through the slides, and I'll be driving it as I've got it up on screen, I just wanted to pay tribute to, I'm currently at Netcare Parklands Hospital in Durban in Overport. We had a memorial service today for one of our staff members that succumbed to the virus on Friday. She was an enrolled nurse. She was 32 years old. She's got 3 young children. The youngest is 1 year old. And for me, it really brought home impact of the virus in our facilities and how our frontline workers are really in the front line as such. It just made it so much more personal. So I just wanted to express our condolences to the frontline workers, the healthcare workers across the entire spectrum, both in the public and the private sector, that have given the ultimate sacrifice and to their families as well.
Thank you very much, Craig. We appreciate that, and it is with deep sadness, as Craig said, Honourable Madam Chair, to the rest of the honourable members of the committee. And of course, this is the last thing we hope for as healthcare professionals and healthcare workers on the front line, that one of us, we leave one of us on the fields of battle. But as painful as that is, these are sacrifices that our healthcare workers have to make every single day. They put themselves out there. And for us as Netcare, the group, and I'm pretty sure my colleagues in the other, from the other groups as well as the public sector, we really cannot express our gratitude to our frontline workers who put their lives on the line every single day, like a soldier going to war. There's been a 5-month war in South Africa, and it is really with deep condolences and with sadness for all of those lives that have been lost in this battle. But and we thank them and we thank their families for their sacrifices, their personal and deep sacrifices to try and save lives and to try and provide a meaningful service to our communities. So with that, I will start, and perhaps I'll just give a brief outline of where we see the lay of the land, and we'll share a few slides in terms of just how the evolution of the pandemic in South Africa has evolved and where we see the numbers. The slides are very numbers driven, but I think it's also just to help give comfort. So I won't talk to every single thing. Some of the slides are busy, but I'll try and just give an indication so that the honourable members can just get a view. And perhaps you would have seen the same numbers in other presentations or in other engagements, and so some of it should not be new. But this is actually a view of South Africa as of yesterday. You can see, and I think we are all encouraged by the signs of a recovery, and we are seeing that throughout South Africa, in every single one of our provinces, there's a steady decline. And And we are really hoping that actually we maintain the steady decline. And Gauteng, which has obviously the epicenter in recent months, as well as KwaZulu-Natal, are showing, actually, if you can see, the total confirmed cases for Gauteng, 206,000 over the period. KwaZulu-Natal, 110,000. In that place, Western Cape, 104,000. But if you look at the recoveries, that's probably the most promising component of it, that actually a lot of those are recoveries and very good numbers. And there's a steady decline in terms of active cases, and that really is what tells us what likelihood we are to expect over the next few weeks to months, the number of active cases. The importance of obviously tracking this, I'm not, even though probably you would have seen this and you would have heard about this, is that actually gives us as a country an indication of what is likely to happen. The smaller that number is in terms of active cases, because those are people that are infecting others, the better it is. So over the last 7 days, what have we seen? And I'm not going to talk to every one of those, but if you look at the last column in terms of the 7-day moving average in daily cases, you can see across every single one of our provinces a steady decline. Gauteng, 13% decline over the last 7 days comparing to the previous same period. Western Cape, minus 16%. Eastern Cape, minus 18%. And obviously, very encouraging in KwaZulu-Natal, which obviously experienced the last surge in about a week or two ago, an 18% decline over the last 7 days. Actually, for KwaZulu-Natal, it's 35%, and Northwest at about 29%. So for the country, we are seeing over the last 7 days a 20% decline in new infections every day. Next slide, Craig. These two graphs are just showing the daily positivity rate. You can see there was a time when actually our daily positivity rate was sitting at about 27%, and currently it's sitting at 11%, and that's very encouraging. And the positivity rate reflects the number of the percentage of the number of all tests and which of those return positive. Of course, we have reduced our testing because the necessity, as the minister pronounced a couple of weeks ago, the demand for testing has declined. But actually that, in fact, shows the extent of how well we are doing and how well the future looks for us, and that we are sitting at 1 in 10 is a positive case, as opposed to a few weeks ago, less than a month ago, where 1 in 4 was a positive test. Next slide, Craig. South Africa actually, and what we wanted to show here is that South Africa, in fact, has experienced an interesting peak to the pandemic. Different provinces have performed differently, and there's obviously different dynamics that show how the pandemic would have actually normalized in different provinces, because there's the social demographic factors, there's disease burden issues, there's also supply of healthcare services that could predict that. So we all know that actually Western Cape was the first one to hit their surge, followed by Gauteng, followed by Eastern Cape, and then Gauteng. But what's interesting about this is that if you compare to any other country in the world, no country has had actually a pandemic trajectory like South Africa has. And if you look at the decline of the peak in Gauteng, that you cannot replicate the experience that was seen in Gauteng anywhere in the world. We've been trying to study this across many other publications, but how South Africa has fared through this pandemic, we had a very flat initial part of the curve due to the very strict and tight lockdown regulations, but obviously the economic pressures and the reduction in terms of the restrictions saw surges in different parts of the country, but still the various provinces performed very differently. Western Cape, surprising to all of us, had a peak, but it wasn't a very high peak. But their decline, as good as it is, has actually been a lot slower in comparison to most of the other provinces. So I know we can't explain this, and I don't think anybody at this point can explain that. Next slide, Craig. And the active cases, in summary, you can see quite nicely that South Africa has had a peak around July, mid-July to late July. And as a country as a whole, we actually in a much better place. And as the president said a couple of weeks ago, The worst place to be is to be probably at this point where we know that actually people will feel that we are past the worst and therefore COVID-19 is a thing of the past. And we actually we may make losses in terms of all of the gains that we've made, and we see a second surge. So we are very weary about the resurgence and the second peak. And we've seen in some of the European countries, as they open up the economies, as they open up borders, there tends to be a resurgence. So we have to be very vigilant and actually keep our guard up and actually ensure that the infrastructure that we put together as a country in collaboration between the public and the private sectors remains intact, because we don't know what the future may show. Next. So this slide again is just showing how the different provinces within the Netcare group, now this is focusing, these numbers actually from me are focusing just particularly on Netcare. It's not an easy slide to read. I think the graphics don't display as nicely as they did when we prepared it. But we just wanted to show that you can see even within Netcare, we experienced the same, where you can see KZN in the light blue there with a late surge but a high peak. Different to the Western Cape, which had an earlier peak, but not as high as some of the other provinces, but tended to be sustained over a longer period. And Gauteng with a very high peak, but a very sharp drop-off. We saw that. So there was the distribution between the private and the public sectors didn't seem to be that different. Next slide, Craig. Next one, Craig. So here, what we are showing is three of our largest facilities in KwaZulu-Natal. So please go back one more. So the three of our largest facilities in KwaZulu-Natal, at the top is St. Augustine's Hospital. The second is Umhlanga, and the third one is second is the Bay Hospital in Richards Bay, and Umhlanga in the northern part of Durban. So you can see that actually in St. Augustine's Hospital we had a high number of cases, and obviously that was also because of what we experienced in terms of the in-hospital outbreak. So we had a lot of early cases around the time of March to April, and probably part of towards the latter part of April. So that was actually the outbreak that we experienced in the province, in the hospital. But as you can see, that actually the surge actually tended to happen largely from community transmission, and we experienced that through the latter part of June, as well as it peaked actually about around mid-July and then started to come down. Whereas you see a slightly different picture at the Bay, where the decline is there, but it's actually not as deep as what we are seeing in the eThekwini area at St. Augustine's Hospital, and Umhlanga, which actually comes from the northern, which drains from the northern part of Durban, actually is also didn't have as high a peak, but you can see that the numbers are relatively still sustained. This is off obviously as about 2 weeks ago. So we will update these numbers with the most recent numbers to show that actually even in those areas we are seeing a promising decline in the number of admissions at those hospitals. Next slide, Craig. So this is the total number of admissions at all of our facilities in KwaZulu-Natal, and you can see that the split was between St. Augustine's and the Bay at about 600 cases each for those hospitals, and a smaller number in Kingsway as well as St. Anne's. At 391 and 343 respectively, and Umhlanga at 231 as well as Margate. So I think for me that actually is consistent with what the pandemic, actually how it unfolded for the province of KwaZulu-Natal. The central, the eThekwini district was obviously at the forefront. Mpumalanga, we know, also was quite hard hit, as well as the South Coast, and you can see that those and Ilebe district was quite hard hit. And so you see those numbers actually demonstrated in terms of the number of admissions. But obviously, what we wanted to show here, we just compared three of our coastal regions in terms of recovery rates. That actually KwaZulu-Natal fared actually as well as the Western Cape in terms of the number of recoveries, and the Eastern Cape And I think everybody will remember in the news, there was quite a humongous crisis in terms of bed capacity for both the public and the private sector. And I think the spillover from the lack of beds in the public sector had a massive impact. And you can see that the recovery was a little bit lower. And we spent a bit of time with the team in the Eastern Cape where the ICUs were full. And I think what you see in the slightly lower recovery rate is actually testament to the struggle. And one of the biggest challenges there was actually the impact on healthcare workers. A lot of the workers were exposed, and some would be off sick, and some would be in isolation at different times. And I remember we had a conversation with some of the doctors. We had at one of our hospitals in the Eastern Cape, doctors were actually providing ICU nursing because we had such a significant impact on our healthcare workers, and we had a severe shortage of staff. But I think that some of the things that we learned, that we observed on the ground, that were quite commendable, that actually there was a spirit of camaraderie, people working together, and everybody putting their hands up and saying, count me in, what can I do, how can I help, how can I be of assistance wherever we had a shortage. To the patients, actually, obviously, hardly felt those difficulties, but all of our teams, all of our healthcare workers really put their lives in the most difficult of conditions. They did more than any other day and more than what anybody would expect of them. And really, that's why we say thank you to everything that they've done and they continue doing during this period. Next slide, Craig. So here is just a summation of the total numbers for the KwaZulu-Natal province. So we saw a total of 2,700 patients, and currently in hospital there's 203 hospitals in KwaZulu-Natal. We've successfully discharged 2,106 patients, and of those fully recovered is 2,017. And unfortunately, we did have deaths, and we had a total of 393 persons that died in our hospitals in KZN. And as you can see, the distribution is a busy, very colorful chart that Craig put together. But what that shows is actually where those patients came from in terms of funding. You can see that actually quite a large proportion, almost 40% of the patients admitted in our hospitals in KwaZulu-Natal were actually government employees. They were government employee medical scheme beneficiaries. A small proportion was Discovery Health medical scheme, and then the other medical schemes obviously in their relative proportions. But it was quite interesting, and I think Craig later on will speak to some of the experiences, especially where we would see quite a lot of healthcare professionals who would be coming to our facilities who are government healthcare workers, and they would come and be admitted at our facilities if they got COVID or if they got sick. Obviously, a large, as to be expected, about 99% were South Africans. But this, for us, this slide that Craig is on is just an indication of actually what has been talked about by the Minister of Health about what are the main comorbidities and the related reasons why people die. And we saw that in our data, and the patients that actually we are still analyzing this data. But out of the 393 deaths in KZN, almost 60% of those patients had hypertension as a comorbidity, or high blood pressure in simpler terms. Diabetes was the second leading cause as a comorbidity. And obviously the combination of diabetes and hypertension, which is a very, very common, and it's diabetes. I remember a few years ago, one of the doctors in KZN said actually Durban is the capital city of diabetes in South Africa. So we would expect that actually those coexisting together is quite a high number. Hyperlipidemia, which is also a cardiovascular disorder, was one of the more common occurrences as well in the patients that died, and chronic renal failure being maybe the fourth or third most common comorbidity as well. Next slide, Craig. What we wanted to talk to about this slide is a bit busy, but I do want to spend a bit of time because I think it's an important aspect of what we do as a contribution to actually managing the pandemic. So, Honorable Chair, you remember when you came to visit our facility at St. Augustine's Hospital, we took you through a digital screening process. I don't know if you remember that interaction. But what we did is actually that we rolled out at all of our facilities, and across Netcare we have been since the pandemic started, we've been screening any visitor, any healthcare worker, and any person who would come to the hospital. We would ask basic core questions as published by the NICD, and we added some other questions to the questionnaire that we thought were very relevant as informed by the published scientific evidence. So in KwaZulu-Natal, we've completed at our facilities in excess of 508,000 screenings. And per day, we screen about 4,300 persons. And of those, we cleared 442,000 people who were green. And out of those, we caught about 52,000 people that actually presented with symptoms that either were consistent with the symptoms of COVID, or they were flu-like symptoms, or they had recently attended, for instance, a funeral gathering, and therefore they would be high risk, or any other of the risk factors that were identified through our screening protocol. And when we would identify people through that, and also temperature was part of the screening process, when we would identify people, we would refer them to actually either additional assessment, and oftentimes we would perform testing for those people that actually they would be designated a yellow status, and they would be treated, if they needed an admission, they would be treated as a person under investigation until we receive a negative test, and then they actually had a screen. And we denied entry to our facilities, 546 persons. Often when we denied entry, it wouldn't be patients. So we never denied entry to patients, but we'd be denying entry, let's say, to somebody who was there for either a delivery, or they were a service provider of some sort, but they were not coming in as a healthcare seeker to the institution, and therefore they would be denied, because the point of the screening was to ensure that we reduce the risk of transmission to other persons working in the hospital or patients that were currently at the hospital. There is a total of 10 facilities that this was operational in our facilities. So as you can see in the bottom section of the slide, that's the breakdown of the reasons why we would have denied or why persons were categorized as yellow. So either the person is actually ill with symptoms that are consistent with COVID. And amazingly, I don't know if any of you have noticed that actually even in the NICD guidelines, there's an update, especially one of the salient signs or symptoms was the loss of sense of smell. And in the 500,000 people that we screened, about 3,300 actually presented with only a single symptom of loss of sense of smell. And that's why they will be categorized as a yellow person or high-risk person. And so you can see the breakdown. I'm not going to talk through all of that, but this is just our view of the screening that we did at our 10 facilities in KwaZulu-Natal. Thank you very much, Craig. Next. So Craig, maybe I can hand over to you to continue from here, and I'll come back towards the end in just summary.
Certainly. Thank you, Sandile. I appreciate that. In total, the slide that we've got on the screen at the moment indicates our staff that have tested COVID-19 positive. The total staff in KwaZulu-Natal in the Netcare group that are our staff is 3,067. We have so far had 431 that have tested positive, or 14% infection rate, if I may mention it in that way. That compares to my Western Cape hospitals, which is currently sitting at 16%, and my Eastern Cape hospitals at 13%. My mortality rate, sadly, we've had 4 of our staff members in KwaZulu-Natal that have passed, giving me a mortality rate of 0.9% of those that have tested positive. The blue line is my total Netcare staff. That would be whether they are nursing or non-nursing. The orange block that you see, which indicate the nursing component. Nurses across my region make up about 68% of my staff that have tested positive, which is in line with expectations, as they are real frontline workers in that regard. And then I've just highlighted where we've unfortunately had lost staff members. The one at Parklands, where I am today, 2 from Netcare, the Bay Hospital in Richards Bay, and 1 from Umhlanga.
I don't know that I must say point of order, Chair, or may I raise some? My hand is up. I wanted to ask something, Chair.
Can we let him? Is it something that wants to that is clarifying this slide?
Yes, I'm asking specifically about this slide.
Okay.
Craig, we have compared your above numbers with Western Cape, Eastern Cape. How is your mortality compared to Western Cape and Eastern Cape?
So fortunately, in the Eastern Cape, with a 13% infection rate, we haven't yet lost a staff member down there, and I hope yet becomes never. In the Western Cape, I've lost 2 staff members there. So they're far smaller components. The mortality rate in the Western Cape is just short of 1% as well. But no, it's actually very similar. The difference for me in the Western Cape is that it seems to have been fast, wider spread community-acquired infections in the early part of the pandemic, which has led to them having an overall infection rate of 16%, which is higher than what I'm seeing in the Eastern Cape and here in KwaZulu-Natal.
Yeah, but if you happen to know, how is your Gauteng doing in terms of staff mortality?
I'm sorry. So in total, I can tell you the group has lost 13 staff members. 6 have been in the coastal region, 4 in KwaZulu-Natal, 2 in the Western Cape. But I don't know the exact locations of the other 7 that have unfortunately passed. Sorry, I just unfortunately pulled this data out of my region.
I know. I was just trying to do a control double-blind randomized clinical trial of mortality, just to see how it compares. So is it in because remember that I know the honourable members of the parliament are also going to be sitting, I hope, or they have with the public sector, so that it's easier to see and what is happening in terms of our frontline staff. Thank you so much, Craig, and thank you so much, Chair and honourable members.
Thank you, Dr. Ngwe. The next bit. Thank you, Honourable Chair. The next slide that I'm showing you there is one of the measures that we use to determine the progress of this pandemic through our hospitals is the availability of our adult critical beds. We had a couple of indicators that we looked at. The one was the consumption of oxygen. The other one was the availability of critical care beds and the occupancies in my adult ICUs through KwaZulu-Natal. Week 1, I started this graph. Well, I took it back for us for this presentation to the first week in June, and it's up until week 13 is the current week that we're in now. And you'll see that our occupancy in our ICUs peaked in week 9, which was towards the end of July, at 88% occupancy, and the number of beds that I had available, adult critical care beds across my hospitals in KwaZulu-Natal, dropped to a low of 34. There's been a steady recovery since then, and each week we've seen more beds becoming available as the admissions into the hospitals have declined, and there's also been a very, very slow increase in elective admissions, so we haven't had the pressure on the ICU beds that we would have normally had in a typical sort of winter period in KwaZulu-Natal. As of this week, we are sitting with, on average, 92 beds spread across my facilities that are available in my adult critical care beds, and my overall occupancy has declined to 68% from a high of 88% 4 weeks ago. One of the things we wanted to touch on as well, and I'm going to ask Dr. Sandile Mhlongo as a clinician to maybe expand a bit on it, is if I go to the next slide, we are looking at a couple of cases of where we're not going to call them reinfections. We're referring to them as recurring PCR positivity as such. At the moment, it's very topical in the news with the case that's just come out of Hong Kong, where they have the first confirmed case of a patient that has tested positive. And chatting to Professor Salim Abdul Karim last night, he mentioned to me that, and he was on ENCA as well, that it was 2 different strains of the virus. We haven't got the genome sequencing of the viruses from these 2 cases, but if I can take you through the first one, it's a registered nurse. She's 38 years old. She is 30 weeks pregnant with no comorbidities. She first tested positive on the 19th of May. Her symptoms were fairly mild with respiratory distress. She was admitted to our Netcare Parklands Hospital for 2 days, continued home isolation for 14 days, and returned to work after a negative swab on the 1st of June. She had a second swab when she became symptomatic on the 14th of July and tested positive again. This is now 6 weeks after the negative swab. She was severely symptomatic with rigors, chills, fever, and cough. Chest x-rays indicated pneumonia. She was admitted again to Netcare Parklands for 19 days this time and had to be placed on high-flow nasal oxygen, and she remains at home currently on maternity leave. The second case for us is a doctor, a neurologist, 61 years old with no comorbidities. She first tested positive on a swab after being symptomatic on the 30th of April with mild symptoms. She isolated for 14 days and returned to work with a negative swab on the 7th of May 2020. On the 25th of July, again, similar sort of time period, she tested positive again after becoming symptomatic with a cough, muscle aches, did not require admission to hospital on either one of these, and isolated at home for 14 days. We are working closely with Professor Lucille Bloomberg and the team at the NICD in tracking these two cases of what we refer to as recurring PCR positivity. I also thought we'd give you a very brief update and just on the timelines on the two hospitals that were very topical for the committee when we last met in April. So if you'll give me an opportunity to touch on St. Augustine's Hospital. Just a bit of history on it. St. Augustine's Hospital is a 492-bed facility located in Berea, eThekwini. On the 2nd of April, after concerns around an outbreak in the hospital, we placed the emergency department on divert in the evening. That was a Thursday evening. On Friday, the 3rd of April, we actually closed the hospital to all new admissions, doctors' rooms, radiology, outpatients, etc. were closed. In working with the Department of Health and with the guidance received from Professor Karim, we actually embarked on a campus-wide swabbing campaign where a total of 1,711 healthcare workers, now this would be the broad definition, including nursing, doctor support staff, etc., were swabbed. Of those 1,711, 80 tested positive. I'm pleased to say that all 80 have recovered. On the 29th of April, we transferred out the last inpatients that were still in the hospital at that stage. The entire facility was deep cleaned and decontaminated again on the 30th of April. And on the 3rd of May, detailed reports were submitted to the MEC and the head of department for KwaZulu-Natal Department of Health. On the 5th of May, Honourable Majola and members of the Parliamentary Portfolio Committee, accompanied by Dr. Dlomo, visited Netcare St. Augustine's Hospital and did an on-site inspection. And on the 8th of May, we received a letter from the HOD allowing the hospital to reopen, which was a Friday. We took that weekend to deep clean and decontaminate the hospital again. And then on the Monday, the 11th, the hospital, the emergency department, the doctor's rooms and radiology reopened. Similarly, at Netcare Kingsway Hospital, which is a 235-bed facility located in Amanzimtoti, south of eThekwini, on the 13th of April, following concerns around an outbreak, we closed the emergency department, we placed it on divert, and we closed on the 14th of April the hospital to new admissions, doctor's rooms, radiology, etc. Our testing was far more localized and focused on the areas where we had seen positive cases coming back. And in total, 168 healthcare workers, again, the broad definition, were swabbed, of which 21 tested positive, and I'm pleased again to say that all have recovered. Similar to our actions at St. Augustine's Hospital, on the 29th of April, the last few inpatients were transferred out. The entire facility was deep cleaned and decontaminated on the 30th of April, and on the 3rd of May, together with the reports we submitted on Netcare St. Augustine's, we submitted reports again on Netcare Kingsway Hospital. The letter that we received from the HOD on the 8th of May spoke to both facilities, allowing them to reopen. And similar to St. Augustine's, we took the weekend of the 9th and 10th of May to open the facility, to deep clean and decontaminate, and then reopen the hospital on Monday the 11th. If I could just, one of the things, the most critical lessons for me that came out of certainly the Kingsway outbreak and our responses to it was the dangers of the asymptomatic patient, or the silent spreader as such, that had none of the symptoms but was COVID positive. And in those days, we were less aware of it than we possibly are now. We have certainly enhanced our screening processes since then. Sandile also asked me to touch on briefly, we are, through our facilities, assisting, as indicated on the slides earlier, in KwaZulu-Natal. The majority of our patients that have been admitted from the medical aids are government employees, either on the GEMS medical aid or on PolMed, for example. We currently have 2 doctors from public sector facilities in our hospital up at Netcare the Bay in Richards Bay that have been admitted with us. And we've also seen a large number of admissions from the GEMS membership base into our hospitals in St. Anne's, in Pietermaritzburg, and in Hospital, which we... Yes, ma'am.
Sorry, Craig. I am looking at the slide. I'm not sure whether you have not left us behind. Are you talking to the slide that is being beamed up, or you are now talking from what we have already shown to us? Are we not left behind as far as the slide is concerned?
No, sorry, Honourable Chair. I didn't put a slide together for the support to the public sector patients or members as such. My next slide is just to say thank you, but I just wanted to touch on it before I went on to the final slide regarding the doctors and staff from the public sector hospitals that have been admitted into our facilities. I'm happy to take any questions that may be posed from honourable members of the committee. And Sandile, I'm not sure if there's anything that you wanted to add to the presentation.
So I would like to just, in summary and in closing, firstly to start by thanking the Honourable Chairperson, Mrs. Majola, and thank you to the honourable members of this committee for granting us the opportunity at the second run around. I think we really recognize the stewardship and we appreciate the guidance throughout this difficult time. And if it wasn't for all of the efforts of the provincial legislature in KwaZulu-Natal and also the provincial the Parliamentary Portfolio Committee and the respective chairs, our struggles and our challenges at St. Augustine's probably would have taken much longer to be able to resolve. We deeply appreciate and really sincerely thank you for all of your efforts throughout those difficult periods, Chair. And the second part is we obviously understand and where our country is. It is very challenging for all of us to go through this pandemic. But I think beyond this issue of the pandemic, we confirmed this at this sitting previously, as well as actually when we presented our views at the Parliamentary Portfolio Committee. The same views that actually we really feel we have private sector has a role to play, and as Netcare we have a significant role to play in the future in terms of providing healthcare services to broader communities rather than actually a small concentrated market. We think there's a real role for NHI, and we are only ready to participate, and really we hope we can make a meaningful contribution to the discourse on how actually access to affordable, high-quality healthcare for everyone in South Africa can be realized in our generation. And Madam Chair, we stand committed to that, to those ethos and those beliefs, because they hold true. They held true previously, and they still hold true today, and they will hold true tomorrow, because it is the least we can do to expand healthcare services, the right to access quality according to our Constitution of the Republic, and we believe we can be a part of that. And we really thank you for this opportunity, and we hope we'll be able to continue engaging in this manner, and we are able to bring ourselves to be held accountable by this committee and various other legislative committees and structures that need to hold us accountable. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Netcare, for the presentation that you have done. Thank you, Dr. Mhlongo. Thank you, Craig. We appreciate this presentation. I think our pattern is to get the next presentation.
Honorable members, Dr. Pula is now ready, and I think thanks to Netcare again, and JMH will take us through now.
Firstly, Chairman of the Portfolio Committee, members of the Portfolio Committee, thank you for asking us to speak today. The notice we only arrived yesterday, and therefore we're not as well prepared as Netcare. However, I've asked Vishnu, as Dr. Mhlongo suggested, that one of the younger guys should do the presentation. So I've asked Vishnu to do the presentation, and I'll be a silent observer. I'd like to only thank the committee for getting involved in helping the private sector to participate in healthcare provision in this country. I think, and JMH firmly believes, that a partnership with the private sector is the only way to provide adequate national health service in the country. And we're ready to participate with the province to provide the service to our patients. I ask Vishnu to do the presentation on behalf of Joint Medical Holdings.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Pula. Good afternoon, Honorable Chair, members of the committee and colleagues in the industry. Thank you for having invited us to participate in the discussion this afternoon. I think it's important for us to share from our experiences and in that process learn from what's happening in both the public and the private sector. I think as Dr. Pula mentioned, the presentation is very short, so my apologies for that, and what I'll do is maybe we'll just expand on some of the detailed stats that have been shared by some of the other groups and circulated as an email after the meeting. So I would just like to give some brief context in terms of JMH and what interventions have been made since COVID hit our shores in March of this year. Like all other hospitals, JMH had to reconfigure our facilities to accommodate PUI and COVID positive patients. I think we had some discussion around this when we had our first meeting in April. And as a result of that, I think most hospitals lost a fair amount of capacity in terms of creating isolation beds. And in our case, we lost about 25% of our bed capacity at the time. We, like all other hospitals, also stopped elective theatre cases. We rolled out COVID committees at a group level as well as hospital level, which included our management team, specialist physicians, and pathologists and surgeons. We also established PPE committees to implement JMH protocol based on guidelines from the World Health Organization and our own NICD. In terms of some of the challenges we have faced, I think like most hospitals, there's been a large number of healthcare workers that have been infected. So scarce nursing resources has been a huge challenge. A number of staff were infected due to community spread, and in specialized areas in particular, we faced a shortage of nurses in high care and ICU. One of the other challenges we faced was in PPE. At the early stages of the lockdown, there were huge difficulties in terms of availability of certain of the items of PPE with largely inflated prices. Over a period of time, I think PPE has become more available now with the lockdown regulations being eased and with imports as well being available. The prices have started to come down. In terms of PPE, one of the challenges we faced is that schemes have been contributing towards the cost of PPE, particularly in the PUI areas and positive areas, and not in other areas of the hospital where I think all hospitals have to take extra precaution in terms of safeguarding and looking after their staff and patients. Next slide, please. Just in terms of our experience, in terms of inpatients admitted within the JMH hospitals, as Dr. Bula alluded to earlier on, we have a few acute hospitals, subacute and day hospitals. In total, we've had, as of last week Friday, 801 admissions to our facilities, of which we had 79 deaths, which comes in at just over 9%, about 10% of deaths. And patients discharged are 648. So we've had 81% of our patients being admitted have now been discharged. And we now have, as of that date, we had 74 patients still in hospital. 5 of them were in ICU, high care 23, and 46 in the general room. Like most other hospitals, we have in the past week seen a reduction in terms of the admission numbers to our facilities. A few weeks ago, we had 120 patients admitted in the hospital, and as you see, last week was 74. As of this morning, we have 42 patients in the hospital. Next slide, please. From a staffing perspective, we have just over 1,200 staff in the JMH group. Number of staff that were infected were 169 across all of our facilities. These included clinical and non-clinical staff. Currently still admitted in our hospital, we have 7 staff, and 27 of them are in isolation, and the balance of them have been discharged and returned to work. Fortunately for us at JMH, we haven't had any of our staff that have lost their battle towards COVID. We still have 7 staff in hospital, but they've all patients are stable. From our investigations in terms of the staffing infections, we noted that most of these infections were community acquired, and some of them that were acquired within the hospital were effectively when staff let their guard down when they were in their tea breaks, in their staff lounges, etc. I think that's the difficulty we have faced and the experiences we have faced. Chair, once again, my apologies for a very, very short presentation. I wasn't aware that we were going to have to present detailed stats, but I will certainly expand on the report and circulate it by email to Kolani and yourself. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Abdullah, for the presentation. And then it will take us to the next presenter. Will depend on you, Dr. Hlengwa, in the line of the presenters.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, honorable members of the Portfolio Committee. Thank you, honorable Chair and honorable members. I was expecting the presentation from live. I don't know whether they were able to log in. They promised they would be able. Live group. I don't know who's representing them today.
How would we know?
They had said it's either a regional manager or someone from the group.
Xolani, do you have anybody from live, according to your list?
No, Chairperson.
Okay.
So currently we don't have live.
Yeah, and then I had a confirmation again from Mr. Mlojwa from Fryhead Hospital, Abakulu's Hospital.
Yes.
Unfortunately, last time he couldn't join us because of technical glitches. I don't know whether today he has made it.
He's not in.
That's. I think for people who have presented and Pochepstein, did they?
No, Chairperson.
You are looking at Telebit.
Yes. Yes.
And
let me explain, Chair, what I had done. Mine was to facilitate the private sector, but the formal invitation was going to come from the committee. So I think most people ask me very late now. I also did the same. Now, just before we start, how are we going to be connecting? Yeah, I'm seeing that. Yeah, so I'm receiving the messages. Let me read this message. Sorry, Chair.
Why we are in this situation? It's because our first meeting was scheduled for the 19th, but because of some other programs that came in from the legislature, we could not make that 19th. And then because of the time, we could not say we are going to defer this. We needed this information as you are looking at it, how critical it is to get it. And then how critical it is for us to have some resolutions on these meetings. I'm not going to blame Live for not being here. I will take the hands. Live for not being here. Whoever is not here, we will have another 10, even if they can be in a position of sending their reports. Especially Fryhead Hospital, they did not have time with them previously. So now I know they do have some reports, but what we would like to do, it's for Dr. Hlengwa to coordinate those reports so that they reach Xolani. Having said that, I'm going to. You have anything to say to them?
Yes, I agree with you, Chair. I actually have a presentation by Live, but because I'm not the owner of the presentation, I'll just forward to Xolani after this meeting. Because they had prepared. I think they had also, because of the change of dates and other commitments that they had in some of their facilities. I think the other issue, Chair, what that I was going to try and suggest is that let's perhaps go back to our 4 to 6 slot. It seems to work better for colleagues. Dr. Friedland, for instance, from Netcare, wanted to join Xolani and Craig, but said because he's tied up until 4. So it seems as if in the private sector, anything after 4 works better.
No, it's fine. The nature of the work that we are doing, if it permits you at least to be available at 4, we will take that into consideration for our next meetings. But currently, we are going to take those reports. If there is no one to talk to those reports and to also respond, I'm talking about live. I don't know, members, would you like those presentations to be done, or we can flag them, but having them with us as members and go through those reports in comparison with what we have already received from those institutions that are present here. Members, I can see your hand, Honorable Viran, but it was before I can say what I am saying now. So I am looking at the hands. I can see the hands for Honorable Kumete, and then Honorable Linda and Honorable Virana. In that, and Honorable Thakur. Honorable Virana, you can come in, followed by Honorable TG, Honorable Linda, as well as Thakur.
Thank you, Chairperson. Yes, with the change in dates, we can't really blame the other medical groups for not being here. So I think I agree with you. Let us just continue with the 2 groups that are here at the moment. I do have some questions for the 2 groups, Netcare and JMH. The one question is just for...
Sorry, Honorable Viran. I just want to check from the members. Let us first agree about what I've said. I need somebody to second you.
Oh.
Then if we are going now to the session where members will be having a bite from the presentation, then we'll be all in that. Can I get somebody to second my proposal?
Yes, Salo.
Chairperson.
Oh.
Chair.
Honorable Kwanyan.
Chairperson, I also agree with Dr. Viran that for those who are not here today, but they can put their reports through Xolani for us to that will be appreciated, so that can get us all together with the one we have received today.
Thank you. Then this is the time for you members to have a bite to all the presentations done. We're having the presentation from Netcare as well as JMH. I'm going to put you in that manner. It's Honorable Virana, it's Honorable TG, it's Honorable
Kwanyana,
it's Honorable Thakur, it's Honorable Linda. Honorable Virana, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Chairperson, and I'd like to take this opportunity as well to thank the private medical groups for being with us and for giving us those presentations. I just have 2 broad questions and then just one specific one for JMH. The broad one is regarding the support that these private sector groups have given to the Department of Health itself. Were there any SLAs or any contracts signed between your group and the KZN Department of Health? Because we were indicated at our previous meeting that there were some negotiations going on, but we never quite got any finality or any answer as to what the outcome of the negotiations are. It was mentioned once by the MEC at one of our previous meetings that she intimated that the negotiations weren't going well because there wasn't any kind of agreement over cost. she made it seem as if the private sector groups were negotiating in bad faith. So we heard what the MEC of Health had to say about those negotiations. I just want to know from your side what happened there. And the second question broadly is what we know from the global picture that there will be a second wave. What preparations has your group put in place to deal with the second wave? In some places like the United States and maybe Spain at the moment, it seems like some of their second waves is even higher than their first waves. Has that been taken into account in your planning? And then my final question for JMH specifically is, were any of your hospitals closed because of the infections there? You understand from Netcare that Kingsway and St. Augustine's had to be closed. Was there any kind of situation like that at any of the facilities under your management? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Virana. Honorable TG.
Thank you, Salo, and thank you again for inviting the private sector. And I greet all the members from the private sector and my colleagues. My question is one, is it JMH? I've noticed that in their numbers, in the admissions and the deaths, Isipingo has got a very wrong or bad ratio compared to the numbers that died and the numbers that were admitted. And again, when it comes to the staff members, my question is then, did you ever look deeply into Isipingo as to why is it outside the normal rate of the people who died, and what have you done about that? And the second one is not a question per se, but it's a request or just a proposal. We are going to have another wave, as they put it, a very serious one. And it is said that most of the things that kill people is this suffocation from this mucus, that thick mucus in there. Have you, or you are still going to do it as groups, just help us put together the way that people could deal with this infection at home? Because what we have experienced now is that some of them die even before they reach the hospitals. My niece, as it is lying in the mortuary, is being buried tomorrow. She couldn't even reach the clinic. But because if you can compile these things so that the committee can recommend them to the department and then start our campaigns as to tell people that once you get this, these are the things that you need to do at home. Prone positions, maybe medication that will thin the mucus, something like that. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Honorable Kumeja. And we then proceed to Honorable Chakur. No, Honorable Wanyana. Honorable Wanyana.
Chair, I just want to greet you this afternoon together with the doctors that are with you there and all my colleagues. To me, Chairperson, it's not about the questions as per se, but I just want to say that we are so grateful to hear and to see that the rate of COVID-19 is decreasing in these hospitals. Yes, we have been visited St. Augustine together with the leadership from National. They've told us that they are busy fighting with this COVID, and it's true that each and every person and each and every patient is entering the hospital, they just do a testing. They did it to us too as well. And I just want to thank to our healthcare workers who put their hands together to fight against this COVID-19. thirdly, Chairperson, to me, it's more or less like the question that has been asked by Honorable Gumede about the medication, that when the patients have been discharged in their hospitals, do they give them some medicine or something that can make them to deal with this thing if it comes back again to them, like those mucus that sometimes when you cough, you had some mucus coming through the throat. Do they give them that medicine as a TTO on their department? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Ngwanyana. Can we then proceed to Honorable Thakur?
Thank you, Honorable Chair. I just want to thank the doctors for giving this report. I want to start off, first of all, by checking. I remember on the last occasion, we were told that, the communication between the hospital groups and the department was not that good. And because of that, I wanted to check now whether there was, routine and open communication with the hospitals as well as the department. And based on that, then we can, approach the department. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that I think my concern on the stats was looking at the number of COVID positive staff. And that's a similar concern even with our Department of Health. But I want to see in the private sector some comment on, the routineness of checking and carrying out things like the SOPs, training, etc., and the physical record keeping. Because obviously when you there must be some weakness in that system because it obviously causes lapses in safety. And the other thing then that's linked with that is the awareness programs in the private sector. And, they obviously budget or invest in these programs, as well as when it comes to community initiatives or awareness, then again, they have to do adverts, etc. And I thought that recently I didn't see so much or read so much in the paper or watch on the TV. And generally the private sector, for their services, they advertise quite widely in a variety of platforms, but I didn't see too much on COVID, and maybe they use other social media platforms, but maybe they could comment on that. The third thing is, of course, I know that JMH was going to speak about challenges, but I didn't see too much coming forward. So I want to check, what types of challenges is the private sector facing, whether it's PPEs, whether it's outages of medicines, and also at this point in time, the infrastructure adaptation, because I know that even in Addington, when the problem occurred initially of the infection, there was the initial report was about the way infrastructure was being adapted. So maybe some feedback on that. If not for this meeting, then maybe for another. The next few things that I wanted to speak about was just maybe comments, but maybe at another meeting we can be told about it. And one was that, because the private sector is generally very good at this post-COVID care facilities, especially with people who have comorbidities, and we see that although they come in, get treated, get discharged, but obviously there are other complications that set in just because of the COVID, and whether they are doing those or seeing to those kinds of patients as well. And then, of course, in terms of treatment, whether they're adopting any other treatment. We know we don't have a vaccine currently, but maybe things like plasma being used for passive immunization, etc. But if somebody is doing those kinds of things, we need to know. And finally, and this is not for now, these two that I'm going to ask you is for another time. I just wanted to see what CSR programs the private sector was embarking on as a result of the COVID-19, and notwithstanding the other programs that you traditionally do. And of course, the opportunities for triple Ps, because I know that now you are getting used to NHI and embracing NHI, and you know that NHI is going to go triple P. So I just wanted to see what, or maybe another report at another time, about the opportunities that you see for triple P, because obviously it's something that we deal with routinely with the Department of Health when we discuss NHI. So I think these are the things. But Honourable Chair, to you, I remember on the initial meeting when we had with the private sector, I had asked why the Busamed hospitals were not reporting to us, because they are, a very popular group as well. But maybe you can share your thoughts on that. But I thought that it would be very good to get input from them as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Takur. Can we then come up with Honorable Linda Hlongwa? I think it's the last one, based on the hands that were showing. Honorable Linda, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Thank you for the presentation. We welcome it. I am very much grateful to the rest of the team. They've asked a handful of my questions, so I don't have much to say really now. Just one or two questions. I was particularly interested in asking about the preparations for the projected second wave, but that is fine. I'm happy with the progress report. I think they've done very well. First question, Chairperson, goes to both groups with regards to the psychosocial emotional support. What support structures were made available for our HCWs there? Because we can see from the numbers that a lot of them got infected, and just not even a handful, just a few, just a drop in the ocean demised because of COVID-19. JMH group showed us a very good report in relation to the numbers that demised, there. But the only thing that's missing, Chair, is the classification of those numbers, the deaths. What slide is this? Slide 3, if I'm not mistaken. I would have wanted to see the age of the people that passed on, and also whether those are males or females. I have a reason to believe, as I said yesterday in the portfolio committee, that we are a nation that needs to refine its interventions and also focus on our male counterparts, because be it HIV, tuberculosis, whatever, men present very late at the clinic. They are not very much so keen on taking care of themselves. The other question is with regards to, I'm noting a very disturbing, let me see that slide here. There's a very disturbing trend I am seeing there. Let me quickly go to the slide, Chairperson, if you'll bear with me. But it shows that most of the people that died, when you look at that slide by Netcare, it shows that those cases, the positive deaths are 393, and 213 of those as a result, not as a result. Those were people with hypertension, diabetes, and hypolipidemia, which I really think it is a problem for all of us. I think I'm taking back to the portfolio committee, Chair, at our right time. We'll have to discuss about the wellness and the well-being of our society. That hypertension is it's a behavioral issue. We just need to address it radically. So I wanted to ask an academic question from both groups Netcare and JMH. What are you taking from this? What are you learning from the pandemic? Are our systems ready to deal with the pandemic should they arise again? The last issue, no, it's not the last issue. Honorable Kwanyana asked about Spingo. I saw that too. I wanted to ask it, but it's fine. How many of the patients in the ICU that went through your ICUs that needed the ventilators, and how many of those demised? Even if you don't have an answer now, you can always indicate to us. We are gathering data for comprehension at a later stage for our own development and learning in the area of health. The last question will be about the patients. I remember at some point in time, the minister was talking about the patients, that at some point a patient will come today without will go to the clinic and be tested but not proved to be COVID positive. Maybe at a particular point in time, 14, 15 days, the patient will come back again and present with COVID-19 symptoms, or will remain asymptomatic but test positive. I would like to know whether you have, out of the numbers that tested through in both JMH and Netcare, whether you did have those kinds of incidents. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you so much, Honorable Songwa. I hope I have covered members who would like to have a bite. Is that so? I might not see the hands, but if your hand is not showing, please let me know that you would like to come in. Thank you, Honorable Dube. Can come in.
No, I just think ukuthi mhlambe masilo siphinde into eyodwa kuzoba sichithela isikhathi, otherwise ngabe senza i-vote of thanks. I-report abasinikeze yona is very good, is very concise, is very precise ngokwe committee. Noma ke ngizwe ukuthi mhlambe eminye imibuzo ke esibabuza eyokusiza nje, which is very important ukuze nathi sikwazi ukuthi sibalancisa kanjani on our side. But Hlalo ngicabanga ukuthi konke kubekeke kahle. We seriously appreciate ukwenza kwakho ukuthi wenze sure ukuthi siba nawo lama meetings. Nami I've served kuleli committee esikhathini edlule, in the time past. Kule term I'm happy ukuthi ngikuleli committee again, and I see some new things that I've never seen before. I seriously want to appreciate, and also Uguti, Dr. Hlengwe, you are very positive in saying when we invite you, you come. Noguti sakalo budlelwane obonisa ukuthi we are partners in fighting against anything that will come against us, whether it's COVID or anything that will come in the future. Nambe ngifuna ukusho lokho nje Hlalo bese ngiyabonga.
Thank you so much, members. Thank you, Honorable Dube. I think now let me give this opportunity to the presenters to respond where there's a need for a response, and then to accept the commendation as it is done. Then this is the time. I will start with JMH.
Can I'm Dr. Bula. Thank you, Chair. I'm going to talk about the clinical aspects. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I just talk about some of the clinical questions that were raised. Somebody asked about plasma. I think plasma has not been proven. And like plasma, there are lots of medication that has not been proven, like chloroquine. And I think we all know about that. There are lots of trials being done about plasma, but because it's not proven, we're very reluctant to use that in the private sector. At JMH at the moment, we are doing a trial with Wits University, where we are taking COVID patients and testing them for antigen, antibodies, and to assess, to see how long the antibodies will last and how long these patients will get protection. Wits University wanted 3,000 patients, and we have undertaken to do 200 patients for them.
We're doing this on patients with COVID to get more information about how COVID behaves. I gave this as a background so you know that as medical people, we don't know exactly how COVID is going to behave in the long term. And because of that, the Wits University is trying to establish more accurate information, and we are part of that team. So when somebody asks, what do you do when you discharge patients with COVID? Well, at the moment, we don't know all the long-term morbidity and mortalities. And because of that, it's very difficult to manage them, but except to give them symptomatic treatment and tell them that if they fall ill, they should see a doctor. As you all know, that it's only recent that we're seeing the same patients can get COVID again. And this is the thing a few weeks ago we did not believe. We also think that a lot of patients, they may go home, and because of the complications, it does not mean that they have COVID, but because of the complications, they developed marked fatigue. And it's not unusual for patients to say the fatigue lasts for as much as 6 weeks, and they complain of headaches and chest pains. We have to treat these symptomatically. We don't really know why patients have this. So I think to answer the first question, that yes, some of these medicines are not proven. And the second thing is that we don't know enough about this disease. I think in the next 6 months, we will learn a little more about the disease, and we would know how to treat it better. The second point I want to make is I think the doctors in South Africa as a whole have done well. In Europe, the mortality rate from this disease has been much higher than the mortality in South Africa. I know the Western Cape, the mortality was higher than the rest of the country, but I think the doctors in the private sector and the public sector have done very well treating this disease. And one of the things that we've learned is we do not ventilate these patients very early. Because once we ventilate the patient, the incidence of mortality is very high. So we tend not to ventilate these patients, and the ventilation is as a last resort. And I think the simple things that we do is we try to give them oxygen at home. We try to use high flow oxygen. We use CPAP machines, and we use non-invasive ventilation to help these patients. An exercise program in the ward is also important, and this seems to have saved lives. Now, I know there was a concern about Spingo Hospital, but we've had the Department of Health visit us several times, and we found that on most occasions, on the one occasion, it was the nurses who were passing the illness to themselves in the dining room. We identified that and we corrected that. But the Department of Health did not find it necessary to ask us to be closed because we were able to contain the infection within our staffing complements. I think that's why I'm going to stop there. Otherwise, I'll give a chance for the others to comment.
Thank you, Dame. Are you alone, or you would like to get somebody else to add to what you have?
Vishnu is also here. I thought I'll just talk about the clinical aspects. I think if Vishnu wants to comment, he will comment as well.
Okay. So whoever is supposed to be coming in, can we let him or her come in? It's a matter of him. All of them are him. Something that we have to check on it, but later.
If the other groups want to comment, they can comment at this time because these were general questions and not only for JMH.
Netcare, would you like to have a bite on this?
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson. I've tried to note down most of the questions, and I would like upfront to apologize to the honorable members of the Portfolio Committee if I miss out on any of the questions, and where I do, we will be happy to, where there's some of the clarity that we'll require, we'll be happy to support additional data over the next couple of days. Just to start from the top, Honorable Virana asked in terms of support and challenges, especially in regards to SLAs with the Department of Health and so on and so forth. So perhaps it's important that I outline the development of the contracts as, from national to the provinces. So we did sign sometime in early May a contract with the National Department of Health. That contract was effectively binding in terms of the prices that we would be engaging on. So we received an instruction during that engagement with the National Department of Health that from then on, service level agreements would be developed, would need to be engaged directly with the various provincial departments, but the prices were set at national level and we could not engage the individual provinces on prices, and it would be just a service level agreement in terms of the referral pathways, how the patients would flow from private sector or from public sector to public sector to private sector and vice versa, and what would be the protocols of care. That was the remaining issues. So we were instructed to engage with the Western Cape Department of Health, which we did, and we were eventually able to sign an SLA with the Western Cape Department of Health. And that was then taken as a blueprint on instruction from the National Department of Health that could be used as a basis for engagement with the other provincial departments. We did, and I'm going to focus maybe here on KZN, we did engage with the KwaZulu-Natal Department of Health. Unfortunately, those engagements have largely been I don't want to say uneventful. If I say uneventful, it's because there really hasn't been much engagement. They really have, to this day, we have not signed an SLA with the Department of Health in KwaZulu-Natal, and therefore we have not received any patient from the public sector as a referral to our facilities. We are, as I said earlier, we are ready and committed and available. And what we did as an organization, and I think it links a little bit to a question earlier from Honorable Taku around CSI. So we made a decision. It wasn't only KwaZulu-Natal where we did not have an SLA. We did make a decision as a group that any public sector patient who arrived at our doors, they would be treated, and the Netcare Foundation would then pay for the cost of care for that patient throughout that stay. It has happened in a few instances across the country. Where we've received patients, indigent patients, not through the SLAs, but patients who showed up at our doors and they received treatment, and we were able to successfully manage them, some of them until discharge, and some of them until there was a bed available where there was capacity constraints in the various public sector facilities where those patients reside. And then moving on to planning for a second wave, there was a second question from Honorable Virana. As I mentioned in our slides, we are obviously very hopeful that South Africa does not experience a second wave, but I mean, the experience across the world is actually showing us that we should be preparing for one. So in our planning for the pandemic preparedness, one of the things, and it also came out in the report that was published by the University of KwaZulu-Natal following the incident at St. Augustine's and Kingsway Hospital, is a recommendation on how we would rezone our facilities to have green zones for patients who are COVID negative, yellow zones for patients who are persons under investigations, and then red zones for positive patients. So we have been deploying that system across all of our 56 Netcare hospitals across the country. And what that allows us to do is to actually zone according to the current demand. So those zones are not static. So in other words, what we planned in April is not going to be what you find today at any of the facilities. Those zones are actually quite malleable, and we understand what the demand at the current time is, and we engage with the hospital management teams on the ground, as well as the healthcare professionals, particularly the doctors, in terms of what are they seeing, what do their patient needs are at the time, and then we make those available. We are currently discussing around how we manage this current level 2 situation, because one of the biggest challenges is that patients who require elective surgery, most of them have had to delay, and most of them have not been able to go ahead with their procedures because we have been purely focusing on COVID patients. And it obviously, there's certain situations clinically where a patient cannot defer a surgical procedure into perpetuity. So we are looking at reopening our facilities, but we are very careful and circumspect in our approach to ensure that we don't just let the guard down, as I mentioned, but we are either reallocating our zones or looking at proper green hospitals where we can continue providing healthcare services, essential healthcare services that are non-COVID related to the rest of the population, but also reserve capacity that we are able to treat COVID patients, because COVID has not left the borders of South Africa. And also that allows us to be able to change the plan in future should we hit a second surge or a second wave where we need to make our hospitals available again. So we will manage that situation based on the demand and the projections and what we are learning from the industry, and in collaboration with obviously what we are learning from other experts and other collaborators from the Ministerial Advisory Committee about what the country should be expecting and it will be experiencing in the near future. In terms of management, I think Honorable Kwanyana and Kumete asked a similar question in terms of management in the community. I think Dr. Bula has highlighted some of the challenges there, but I wanted just to comment that we do, one of actually our divisions, Netcare 911, has actually in fact had the highest volume of during the COVID pandemic. So that's our services division, where we move, we either transport patients from facility to facility or home to facility and vice versa. So I think the only comment I can make here, Honorable Kwanyana, is that it is absolutely critical that the education around management in the community is entrenched and people know how to reach emergency services. And we, as I said, we remain available, but of course that is determined by the Department of Health should they want to use our emergency services, and that's part of the SLA that is still unsigned. So we, from our point of view, wherever there's been an emergency, a need for a transfer or a need for any intervention, Netcare 911 has been delivering that service across the country. And as I said, they have been extremely busy during the COVID period. And we do know that actually patients can rapidly deteriorate, I think to your point, where by the time an ambulance arrives, if it arrives an hour later, that might be too late. And what we've learned during this pandemic is that supply of supplemental oxygen can be the determinant. Patients actually with COVID are really air hungry, and even if they are on high flow nasal oxygen, that can become a significant constraint to their breathing, and that's how you end up sometimes having to ventilate. And to Dr. Bula's point, we know that once ventilated, the mortality rates are much higher. In excess of 50% of those that were ventilated in our facilities ended up dying in any event. So it is really the early intervention that is quite critical. TTOs, currently there isn't any evidence-based treatment for COVID-19 across the world. So TTOs are usually supportive care. So if a patient, for instance, you were talking about sputum that maybe might be causing congestion and difficulty with breathing, we would consider that as symptomatic relief. So it depends on each individual patient, and therefore the doctor will make an assessment on what are the needs for a particular patient, and they are always provided with a TTO related to what symptom burden that they have, but it is usually symptomatic relief rather than any particular intervention, because there isn't any intervention that is evidence-based. So that goes for the plasma question, hydroxychloroquine issues, azithromycin, and other treatments that have been purported in the literature, but most of the treatment is really symptomatic relief and obviously supportive care in terms of ventilatory support, be it from nasal prongs or masks or eventually mechanical ventilation. Honorable Taku asked a couple of questions. I'm going to try and run through it, most of them. I think I've highlighted your first point, the first question, Honorable Taku, around our difficulties in engaging with the Department of Health. I'm going to be honest, I'm not trying to be a primary school learner trying to go and report to the teacher about what challenges they have. But the challenges with the Department of Health in KwaZulu-Natal are historical and they remain. So in terms of engagement, it isn't the easiest province to engage with in terms of collaborating or finding solutions or working together. And those, and I think you know very well in terms of what we presented last time with throughout the St. Augustine's difficulties, the engagements have really been difficult and they remain so. Maybe the tone has improved, but the engagement is really non-existent to a large extent. In terms of safety protocols, record keeping, I think Dr. Pula spoke to the issue around behavioral interventions. We know that actually some of our healthcare workers, the reason why they were getting infected is not out of a lack of PPE. That goes, I'm not going to speak for other institutions, but we know that it's not just purely PPE that causes infection. Some of the challenges, and it came out of the report that the UKZN team wrote for us, it's behavioral, it's training. We do train, but people don't always assimilate that training and change behavior immediately. So it's consistent. It requires consistent reinforcement, and we've been doing this in our toolbox talks and as well as our daily interventions at shift change to make sure that everybody is reminded. And also we have employed people whose sole job is to spot. So when you say spot, it's like, that's all they do. They sit and look for breaches in protocol, and wherever there are breaches, we take those people for further retraining, and we document and we keep those records. I cannot lie and say we were always perfect, especially at the beginning of this pandemic. We did struggle with some of our record keeping, but I think we've learned a lot and we've improved systematically in terms of making sure that every requirement in terms of the Department of Employment and Labour for training and record keeping, we are very compliant. We've had inspections across the country, and we are making sure that those records are available on demand. And we are making sure that there's reinforcement. But some of the infections that we are reporting here are community acquired. So people tend to have to be very vigilant in the hospital where they know there's high risk, but once they in their communities, in taxis or in other various social areas like supermarkets and so on, they tend to be not as vigilant. And we saw that very early on in the pandemic as well, that we were not seeing a lot of infections in the ICU, in the red ICUs where COVID patients were being cared for, especially at the beginning. We were seeing them in the general T room areas or in the green wards where you would expect nothing. So there is a role of the symptomatic spreader that actually is undocumented, people who we don't think they have the disease but are spreading. That's how St. Augustine's happened. And as well as Kingswell outbreak happened, it was asymptomatic spreaders. And the false negative also is a risk that we all are aware of, where people test and their results are negative, but it is a false negative, and we put them in the green wards and everybody lets their guard down because we think everybody's safe. So that was another big risk. But tea lounges, social areas, transport, communal transport especially, was one of the biggest risks for transmission among healthcare workers. And I want to just maybe link that to a question that came much later on from Honorable Song around psychosocial support for healthcare workers. Routinely, we have iCares, which is an external organization that provides support for all of our staff. And we continue during COVID to make sure that there's psychological interventions, emotional support. And I must thank also some of our doctors who made themselves available to counsel, psychiatrists especially, and psychologists as well as occupational, who made sure that they could counsel and support our healthcare workers as necessary. But also we do have a division, a mental health division within Netcare, a CARESO division, of which I'm the managing director of. We put together programs that would be targeted at facilitating and supporting not only the infected healthcare workers, but their colleagues, as well as their families, as well as the leadership teams on the ground, because this was a very difficult time. So it is early on still, and we are learning every day, but we have put together quite comprehensive programs to ensure that actually there is staff support at various levels of function. PPPs and NHI, there isn't really any conversation around PPPs in the short term that I'm aware of, but we are obviously very much keen to participate, and we do participate in the various forums regarding NHI, and we will continue to do so because it's our commitment to broaden access, to broaden sustainable and affordable access to high quality healthcare. Honorable Songa, we spoke about men versus women. We did show in our slide a breakdown that there were, out of the 393 staff that were infected, females were 203 and males were 190. The average age of our staff, in terms of deaths, I'm giving a wrong stat there. It's deaths, 393 deaths, 203 females, 190 male, and average age is 63. And I've spoken about the comorbidities. So in terms of our staff, we can add those numbers as well to show that just the main distribution around where they came from and the age groups. But our staff tended to be a lot younger, and hence you see the very good recovery rates. And across the country, we've had a total of 13 healthcare workers that demised due to the virus. And some of the people that demised were quite elderly. And we did obviously screen and assess all of our healthcare workers to ensure that we remove those that were high frontline to ensure that they are protected by all means. And in terms of learnings and challenges, that's my last contribution on this. I think NCDs are a major contributor to your point, Honourable Hlongwa, to mortality, and we saw that. So age was one independent contributor, but non-communicable diseases, especially hypertension, diabetes, those are diseases of lifestyle. I agree with you, and we've got, as a society, as a country, we've got to do a lot more to ensure that the interventions aiming at curtailing the spread of or the burden of disease coming from non-communicable diseases, we do a lot more of, and I think we are nowhere near where we should be. So we've got to make a commitment to really expanding and growing primary healthcare services. These are not tertiary services, these are not tertiary illnesses, but they are primary healthcare interventions, and we've got to focus on a lot more intervention. I think that's where actually the role of NHI becomes quite pivotal and critical, that community interventions is what will prevent actually what we see at tertiary and quaternary levels of care. And then our challenges obviously remains in staff that were infected, and or what we would see is that actually as even if there are recoveries, when you don't have nurses to provide patient care, you have no nurses, you might as well close down the hospital. So it was one of the biggest challenges throughout the pandemic, where we would be isolating or quarantining, because even though you see numbers of those that were infected, a lot of our personnel had to be quarantined because they had been exposed. So we didn't show that number, but that number is much higher than the number that we are seeing now of people who had to complete a 14-day quarantine period and then only come back once they actually had completed that period. And that meant we couldn't really provide the best care that we had intended. There was another thing that developed obviously across the country, where some of our nursing personnel were giving us short-term notices for resignations to join the public sector, because the public sector had obviously initiated a lot of these facilities where they were looking to staff them with nursing. And so we actually had quite a number of resignations, 24-hour notice resignations for people who were leaving. But on two maybe big critical issues that we really found a challenge with was oxygen. I remember Craig and myself were driving to East London, to Port Elizabeth, and we were discussing. We ran out of a 10-ton tank of oxygen over one day. So you can imagine that's an bulk oxygen supply to supply the whole hospital, and it ran out in less than 24 hours. Because COVID was such that the demand for oxygen was so high, we were seeing flow rates provided to patients that we, as a clinician or a former clinician, I have never seen in my life. I'm not too sure what Dr. Pula's thoughts would be on what they saw with their oxygen demand across the hospitals. We had to invest quite a lot of money in terms of upgrading our entire oxygen infrastructure. It wasn't just the ventilators, it was just the tanks that store the oxygen, the supply, the piping that had to go into the different ICUs and wards. We had to upgrade all of that across all of our facilities to meet the excess demand, and it became really difficult when we were running out of oxygen and we had to refill almost on a daily basis massive tanks of oxygen. PPE, I think we were quite comfortable that we always had adequate PPE. At the beginning, it was quite a challenge, and we had a lot of fly-by-nights, and therefore quality of the PPE that we were getting, we had to scrutinize and ensure that it met the requested standards. But I don't think we really had a challenge in terms of providing for PPE throughout the time. We had to be very conservative in terms of trying to save it and making sure that we don't spend all of our money and burn on PPE costs. But I think we were comfortable. And the last, I think, challenge, as I said earlier, treatment protocols that are non-existent remains a challenge. But I think I did want to mention something that I'm forgetting, Honourable Chair. I wrote it down. I can't find it for the life of me now. But I think the engagements with the likes of yourself, Honourable Chair, and this portfolio committee and the National Portfolio Committee on Health has been very helpful to us. The department has been very supportive, the national department, in terms of actually the engagements and guiding us as a society, as healthcare professionals and healthcare industry. So we are quite appreciative of that. I think there's a lot more to learn. Are we ready for another pandemic? I don't want to comment on behalf of Netcare. I think as a country, we still have a lot to do. I think we've successfully navigated the first part of this pandemic, but it showed us that there are massive gaps and disparities in terms of care and service provision, and we've got a long way to go to prepare our systems to deal with the next pandemic. Thank you very much, Honourable Chair. I don't know if my colleagues, Craig, do you have anything to add?
Thank you, Sandile, and thank you, Honourable Chair. Just the one thing that I wanted to unpack was on the question of communication between the hospitals and the Department of Health and Quality Health. I think that as the pandemic unfolded, what we noticed was that there was a closer collaboration between the hospitals and their local district officers, and that certainly, in my opinion, from an operational perspective on the ground, enhanced the communication that we had with the Department of Health. So there are far closer relationships now, in my opinion, between our hospitals and their various local district offices or community regions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. With this highly informative presentation, in fact, these presentations that have been given to us, they are of, I would say, of high importance in closing each and every gap that we feel you would have. I know all of us, we are the beneficiaries, we are the potential beneficiaries of your services as the private sector. But before I can say more, I wish I could quote some of the words from Ubaba Usisulu. I open the quote. It is a law of life that problems arise when conditions are there for their solutions. We have been, close quote, we have been struggling as to how do we come up with the actual implementation and also actual acceptance of NHI. But COVID came in. It came in as such a disastrous killer, the way we have seen in other countries. But I would say its existence, it has opened the eyes. It has also addressed what is being said here. A law of life that problems arise when conditions are there for their solutions. Our solution here is the NHI. That is what I am looking at it. Even this COVID came as a law of life so that in dealing with it, the government really appreciates the repurposing of itself for the benefit of South Africans. Of South Africans. So there is no better time from us as people of KZN of appreciating what COVID has done to us. Although it came as a killer, but out of it, it planted something that no one could remove it, that we all need each other. Repurposing that has been done, it has been done for the benefit of all the citizens of KZN. You can spread it widely to other provinces. Now, if we cannot use this opportunity of accepting this concept of NHI and put it into its existence, we will be failing, because it's going to assist us to have one service provider of health and one purchaser of the health package with a huge number of beneficiaries at their own choice without any financial constraint. That is what I can say. With those words, I would say, thank you so much, honorable members, for affording me the opportunity of being with you at this point in time. Yesterday, we had a long meeting. Today, we woke up with another meeting. And if now you are still with me in whatever that I wish we could do as this committee. So I really appreciate your humbleness in this portfolio committee, and I can see your vision. Even wherever we are, when we are talking of the oversight, I can see the passion within you. Even if a person is not within a health profession, but it is not a single day when going home without saying, today I have learned something different. Today I have learned one word from health, because when you analyze that word health, you will come up with something every day. So thank you so much. Going to the private sector, thank you so much, Dr. Hlengwa, Dr. Mhlongo, Dr. Murphy, is Craig Murphy, am I correct?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct, but it's not a doctor, just Craig Murphy.
Craig, okay, and then Dr. Bula. Thank you so much for not failing us. I know that it is not more of your own doing. It was more of our side when we first said, let us have our meeting on the 19th, with the hope that we will be able to have that meeting. But it has been so unfortunate. So for you to say, even if we could not have that meeting on that date, on the 26th, you will be with us. Thank you so much. The information that you have shared with us, it is so critical in our oversight. Tomorrow, on Friday, we'll be going out on oversight, and we will be using the information that you have given us as some of our tools of analysis in whatever we'll be seeing there. I am not going to say more. I think, as I said initially, when I said ngenani bantwana bam, ngithe ngenani bantwana bam, because we are the ones who gave birth to you by giving you the licenses to practice. It was our labor ward. We took you through the nursery. So there's no time that we can say now we must take you to mortuary without any problems, without any medicine not from our side. At the same time, without taking you to any rehab if a need arises. So I would say, with those words, I am very, very much humbled with the way you are doing your work. Hopefully, the word National Health Insurance, one day it will be the only word we are talking of as the government when we are talking of the Department of Health. Thank you so much. Having said that, I think now, if we can see, we can get Xolan to beam the agenda.
Oh.
From, I think 8, we are done with 8. Am I correct, Xolan? We have received the
except me, Chair. Except a response from me. Except a report from me, Honorable Chair, Dr. Hlengwa.
Okay. I will give you that response now, because we are now going for 9. My apology for not giving you a space between me and you.
Okay.
Between me and the closer. You can come in, Dr. Clem.
Yeah, because I thought the Chair was going to close here. Honorable Chair, honorable members, thank you so much. We are very right, Chair. We are absolutely right, Chair. The one mistake we always do as human beings is not want to learn from disasters. We only see disasters as negative things. I am not old, no, I'm not young, but perhaps the days that are left for me to live are equal to the days I've lived in my life. I've seen 3 disasters in KZN. The so-called low-intensity black-on-black violence, the HIV and AIDS epidemic, the market crash of 2007, 2008, and now this epidemic, COVID-19. There are so many things we've learned before. And one of them that all of us will agree is that leadership is key. Leadership is key. My plea to the honorable members of the parliament, because we voted you to go and sit there and to oversee that things are happening, is to pray to God that, as my colleague Dr. Mhlongo was saying, and perhaps I can't remember Dr. Bula's comment on this, we really need to forge the public health sector and the private healthcare sector working together. And it takes leadership for that to happen. Leadership on both sides. Let me tell you a short story, Honorable Bishop, that Professor Bula, I call him Professor, was my lecturer. That's from 1990 at the university. He used to send me and say, go and take bloods from that patient. He used to take me for exams at 2 in the morning. But the relationship we have now as colleagues is that he is my leader, he's my senior, but he can still listen to my opinion. Now, that's a good leader. When I asked Richard, he said, no, Craig and Dr. Mhlongo will be able to handle the feedback, which we have seen they've done very well, just like GMH. I'm saying, members, please, let us look at this issue of leadership. Let us look at the issue of leadership. Because we've got 2 problems that are coming. In fact, 3 inevitable problems that are coming. 1, the second wave is definitely coming. People forget that we went to a state of disaster when we're seeing only 15 new cases a day and went to lockdown stage 5 at 100. We now sit hovering around 2,000, 2.5. Sorry, Chair, if I'm taking your time.
No, you are not. There's something interrupting. Sorry.
That's a huge number. That's a huge number. There is no doubt to me that the second wave is coming. Now, if the second wave will come without us having learned things from the first wave, then we'll be in serious disaster. Number 2, the economic meltdown in the world has started. And we're going to be facing that as a serious, this is going to be the most serious challenge worsened by the COVID-19. And lastly, the climate change, which will result in all things, as you know, food security, droughts, and other and disasters. This leadership is leading us in a very peculiar time. Some leaders, like Solomon, never even fought one battle. They had all the good time. But his father, David, was fighting every day. This leadership is going to be faced with these three disasters at the same time. It's going to be very tough. As we go as a private sector to go and prepare, please, I beg you, because you are the only one who can listen to other people, to go and find it in your heart to see what is it that you can do, because our people are going to be facing these three disasters. We who have been in clinical practice for 20 years, we know that the beginning of September corresponds with the outbreak of seasonal flu, seasonal pneumonia, bacterial pneumonia, seasonal gastro, all these things. Angazi kulokuza mashisa angayete unasika wengushikama sakhuluma ngeke ngikhulume ngoba ngeke ngisole isikhathi sokukhuluma andizi lapho andizi. So we really thank you because you're giving us time, but
the person must protect us.
Yeah, we are so grateful that this committee is united. You can always feel that. Is acknowledging its leader. We can see that this is a good example of how each and every department should be doing. I thank you. May God bless you. May God bless KZN. May God bless South Africa. In Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Dr. Smangaliso. Thank you so much for those wise words. I think after I have spoken, I'm not expecting some other hands again, but I'm seeing a hand. What do I do, members? Must I accept that hand?
Councillor, we're not getting into any other debates or event, but even with Dr. Hlengo was given a chance because he had his presentation and he's a coordinator here. I think we've come to an end now.
Thank you. Thank you. Honorable Chakur, you bear with me. I am led. So please, whatever you have, if it's something that is in line with this, we will always have something through Xolani as well as through Dr. Hlengo. I would say, having said all those words, thank you so much, members. Our meeting has come to an end. I will always appreciate you. I will always love you. Thank you so much.